Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast, the podcast that Hudson Thames thought would be annoying and woke. I'm your host, Michael Ford, and we're going to take you on a ride on our little racial draft journey where we change the complexion of the comic universe one draft pick at a time. Let's just jump right into it. We're still catching up on the rounds that we missed during our month-long hiatus. Last round that we finished up was round 6, so we're going to jump right into round 7 of the season 8 racial draft. This was a pretty interesting round in that every character has made its way to another form of media, most of them in live action. Who better to start us off with the black delegation who drafted Mystique. You might know Mystique from over 20 years of being portrayed in live action. You know, back in the first live action X-Men movie being portrayed by Rebecca Romaine, where she brought the famous naked scales look into popularity. But the black delegation, this is an interesting pick for a number of reasons. Obviously, Mystique is a shapeshifter, and even though she's traditionally understood to be white, one of the benefits of being a shapeshifter and having blue skin in her natural form is that really that blue skin can really be the background for any racial background, so to speak. So, you can imagine a world where a black person black people had a child that was a blue skin, and she decided to sort of take passing to another level. If you kind of catch my drift. So Mystique has always been able to seamlessly blend in to any society, and I think that having her be reimagined as a woman of color adds an additional layer to her, particularly as a character that has definitely been on the anti-hero villain spectrum as far as what her character's orientation is. And she's definitely willing to kill. She's definitely willing to break rules and dance with the devil, so to speak, in terms of her willingness to compromise moral to cross moral lines. And I think that having her be a woman of color adds another dimension to her status as a mutant and as an oppressed minority. So, in this instance, the Black delegation did not give a fan cast. I have my own ideas as far as who I'd like to see her be portrayed by, but I'm not going to muddy that up. So we'll jump from my thoughts on this to where I would say I strongly approve of Mystique being black. But the people had other ideas, unfortunately. The people only went 50-50 here. 50 strongly, sorry, some would approve, and 50 strongly disapprove of Black Mystique. Very disappointing. This is a good time for me to mention that there are a number of places that you can cast your vote and make your voice heard in terms of our past picks and our future picks, for that matter. RacialDraft.com is the hub. That's the website where you can see all the picks, both from this season and past seasons. You can, of course, search by character, you can search by delegation, and you can, scroll through this season's picks, see what their approval ratings are, and as I've mentioned on other shows, but I'll mention again, the polls are open for the entire season, so you can cast your vote on all of the past picks from this current season on racialdraft.com. Other places that you can cast your vote are Instagram, where the polls are also open for the entire season. You can also cast a vote on Twitter, where they're open for 7 days. And of course, on Threads, where they're open for 24 hours. So you really have to, if you're on Threads, you really have to jump right on it as soon as the picks come in and cast your vote. Yeah, let us know whether you approve of these picks. Let us know your thoughts. You can also make your long-form thoughts beyond the polls known to us at racialdraftpodcast@gmail.com. Moving on from the first pick of the round, of round 7, to another character who, again, was portrayed well, I would say, in live action. And that would be the Native American delegation drafting Namor, as he is critically pronounced, but Namor was how he was pronounced in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where I think was one of the most successful real-life racial draftings in the introduction of Comic-Con and the reimagining of Namor as Mayan, and his community, his underwater community, being a response to colonizers, conquistadors in his native land, and his people's willingness to rise up and fight those colonizers. I think that that's really given more a dimension that didn't fully manifest, or at least I would say, you know, the dimension existed, but the motivation had become more nuanced and become a lot more sympathetic than his counterpart. And I would say that benefits the more, and I think it continues to move forward. He can also be seen, this character, in his more native looking form, not exactly like how he looked in Wakanda Forever, but I would say an in between where he looks traditionally in comics and how he looks in Wakanda Forever, as part of the Marvel Rivals video. I'm not a big gamer, but those of you who are gamers, let us know what it's like to play as Namor, in that media, in that form of media. All that is to say that for me personally, I'm a big fan of the change, the additional dimension that was added to Namor, and brings him firmly in the territory of the Native American delegation. Unfortunately, people didn't really fall on my side of things. They did somewhat, 66.7% approval rating, so about two-thirds of y'all liked this reimagining. 66.7, all of which were strongly approving, and 33.3 somewhat disapproving. In this instance, we did get a fan cast. I have to be honest, wasn't a big fan of myself, and that's Forrest Goodluck, an actor that I've seen in a couple things, but not major roles. I just don't think that he has the physicality that we typically associate with Namor. And that's another instance where we only got 66.7 approval rating and 33.3 somewhat disapproving of the fan cast of Forrest Goodluck as Namor. Moving on from the Marvel side of things to the DC side of things, this is another character that we've seen in live action, albeit definitely reimagined from how he's portrayed in the comic books, and it would be Jonathan Kent, sometimes Superboy, sometimes Superman, son of Kal-El. He recently aged up from the small child that he was during the Super Sons days to more, I would say, college-aged young adult. Jonathan Kent has come a long way over the last few years, and I still think that there's a potential for him in the DCU. Probably a few years off, I would say, because we're just, a little bit, few months away from Superman's debut in this new DCU. But we have seen a Jonathan Kent, teenage version of Jonathan Kent, who did develop Superboy abilities in the Superman and Lois television show. And I thought that, he had his ups and downs. He was played by two different actors, that Jonathan Kent, neither of which truly embodied the way that we think of the character in the comics. But he did his best. And Superboy was drafted in this instance by the multiracial delegation, who also drafted Superman and Lois Lane. So multiracial background all around. And if we really think about it, particularly if we're talking about white passing, or at least veering towards white passing Superboy to go along with white passing Superman, I think that's something that could clearly work, and it's something that hasn't doesn't go too far out of the realm of possibility or diminish the character in any way. And I suppose it's for that reason that the people went ahead and gave it 100% approval rating. 33.3 strongly approve and 66.6 somewhat approve of multiracial Jonathan Kent. No fan cast in that instance, so we shall move on. And this is another character who was portrayed in live action, and this would be Cassandra Cain, who was played by, I'm forgetting it. Ella J. Bosco, sorry. Yeah, she was played by Ella J. Bosco in Birds of Prey. And I gotta be honest, it was definitely a polarizing portrayal of the character. I understood what they were going for, but, she definitely left a lot to be desired in the eyes of big fans of the Sandra Kane character, particularly because of her lack of physical acumen, which is a big part of the character. Even though she was still East Asian, which again the Southeast Asian delegation did draft Sandra Kane in our racial draft, so they kept things as is, and I think that was smart. I think that's strong use of the character in that sense. However, in terms of the fan cast, they chose an actress who is a lot more physical, and that would be Lukita Maxwell, who I'm not familiar with actually, but I've seen some scenes of her doing action, and I think that she's more in keeping with what people imagine when they think of Cassandra Cain. As far as the approval rating for the pick, 100% approval rating for still East Asian Cassandra Cain, with all 100 strongly approving. With respect to the fan cast, however, only 85.7% approval for Lakita Maxwell as Cassandra Cain. Moving on to a character that I think uh, needs hardly any introduction, that would be Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, as portrayed by Vincent D'Onofrio, and as drafted by the white delegation. Obviously, has been said before, Wilson Fisk has been played, most notably by Michael Clark Duncan. I had my quibbles with the idea of Michael Clark Duncan. I mean, I think Michael Clark Duncan did a good job in the role, but I think that one of the challenges with Wilson Fisk is the sort of open secret aspect of him, being a quote unquote respectable businessman while also simultaneously being understood to be a notorious crime lord. But the law is hardly ever make the card stick against him. And, as a black man, I know how difficult it is to kind of live in a world where your innocence is generally not taken for granted. Your innocence until proven guilty, so to speak. And, to have a character that is so openly criminal, but for whatever reason, the law, escapes escapes accountability, generally falls in line with white privilege. And for that reason, I think he's better suited, the Kingpin is, for the white delegation. So for me, I got to strongly approve to staying in that realm, staying in the world of the white community, so to speak. And yeah, 100% approval rating for White Kingpin, with 50% strongly approving and 50% somewhat approving, and a full 100% strongly approving of Vincent D'Onofrio's performance as Wilson Fisk, which again needs no introduction. We're going to see him in a little over a month as he returns to the MCU in the Daredevil Born Again series. So I can imagine that this approval rating, I can't get any higher than 100%, but I don't see it changing anytime soon. Again, these polls on the website on racialdraft.com remain open. So if you feel a little bit differently, whether positively or negatively about these polls and about these picks, go ahead and cast your vote, and we will revisit them at the end of the season. This brings us to a character that this one's a little bit more complicated. This character made her debut on animated form in the DCU Creature Commando series just a couple of months ago, and we're talking about the Bride. And I would say that this is a character that was successfully introduced to a larger audience, and the character's still with us. Spoilers for the show, and who knows if there will be more appearances. But like I said, I think the character was well received. Obviously, the voice actress, who is also known for great portrayals in live action, is Indira Varma. And wouldn't you know it, the South Asian delegation, Indira Varma, who of course is South Asian, went ahead and got their gal. And like I said, I think they did a great job of bringing her in to the fold. Now, we can quibble a little bit as to whether there's a lot in the portrayal of her in the show that makes it clear and obvious that she's South Asian. Obviously, a big part of her origin is that she's a collection of body parts that were sewn together. But you can imagine a world in which the body parts that were used, if not the brain, were of Indian women, who are, viewed in, at least in Europe, as maybe a little bit more expendable, a little bit more disposable, especially if I know that in the cartoon they had our origin be somewhere in Eastern Europe, but traditionally I would say Frankenstein is more of a British, is more of a British character. Therefore, as I've mentioned, there are a lot of South Asians in England that could have been used as carry-on fodder to create the bride. And it goes back into this idea that the men in her life didn't fully respect her and her autonomy. So to that end, I think that does add another dimension to the character in a positive light as to why the bride might be viewed more appropriately as South Asian. But I'm just jump right into the approval rating. 100% approval rating for South Asian Bride. 66.7 strongly approve and 33.3 somewhat approve. And also, with a similar percentage, 100% approval rating for Indira Varma as the bride. And, I concur. So, again, a successful debut. If this was your introduction to the bride, I would say that you were that most people were impressed, and I would like to see that character continue, perhaps in live action, but definitely portrayed by Indira Varma. Moving on from a character that has made their debut very recently to a character that's been around in live action for quite a while, and that would be the Vision. The Vision, most notably played by Paul Bettany in the Avengers movies in the MCU, and also, of course, as part of the WandaVision series and an upcoming series which used to be called Vision Quest, but we're not sure what it's going to be called kind of going forward. Now, as of yet, I have not heard from the Jewish delegation how they intend to imbue the Vision with a Jewish identity, so that does remain to be seen. But as of now, the idea is that the Jewish delegation drafted him. They also picked an actor for the fan cast, so they won't be using Paul Bettany. This is Ido Goldberg, who you might know from Peaky Blinders. Fine actor, and I think he can more than capably pull off the portrayal of the Vision. But again, not quite sure how this character would be imbued with with Jewish identity. That does remain to be seen, but did not stop the people from giving 100% approval rating for the Jewish Vision and also Ido Goldberg as the Vision, with 50% strongly approving and 50% somewhat approving. Moving on from the Vision to the Black delegation, so the Latin delegation drafting of a traditionally Black character. Obviously, in this instance, he will be Afro-Latino, but as we mentioned, and as we've mentioned before, what happens when you racially draft someone is that even when the character has multiple racial characteristics, this would be the identity that this character primarily identifies as. So, big L for the Black delegation and losing this character, Blade, to the Latin delegation. This one's a little tougher. It's tough for a number of reasons, because a lot of what Blade represents, he doesn't just represent a person that kills vampires. He represents someone who kills vampires with a certain amount of style and a certain amount of kind of the best way of explaining it is that the 1990s Blade movie portrayal by Wesley Snipes gave that character an identity that he didn't have before. And in many ways, the comics portrayals of Blade have been strongly influenced by the mark that Wesley Snipes made with this character. Obviously, in the comics, Eric Brooks, who became Blade, grew up in London and, again, grew up in, kind of on the streets of London as I forgot the term, the Dampier, I believe, is half human, half vampire, who has all the strengths and none of the weaknesses of being a vampire, including, the one weakness being the thirst for blood. So much of how Blade is identified and so much of how Blade has been embraced by the Black community, does seemingly undercut the notion that if Blade were something other than black, perhaps not be fully embraced by the community. All that is to say that he's a good character, and the Latin delegation has gotten themselves their own kind of win, but maybe at a much bigger loss for the character as a whole, in my opinion. But we'll go ahead and see whether the people disagree with that. As of now, 66.7% approval rating for Latino Blade, with all 66.7 somewhat approving and 33.3 somewhat disapproving of Latino Blade. Just recently, which means you still have time to vote for it, the Latin delegation went ahead and submitted their fan cast for their version of Blade, and that would be Coleman Domingo. You know Coleman Domingo. Fine actor with a lot of swag and a lot of style. If we're gonna live in a world where Blade is Latino, and like I said, Afro-Latino, but Latino primarily, having him be portrayed by Coleman Domingo is quite the choice, quite the great choice as far as I'm concerned. Now, in addition to getting the fan cast, we also got some fan art. So go ahead and check it. All the different sites, the Twitters, the Blue Skies, the Instagrams, threads, everywhere that you can find the racial draft, and see the fan art from our guy Carlos Freitas, who hopefully will be back on the show soon to talk about his picks. But as of now, with the polls, wide open, so go ahead and cast your vote. We're sitting at 100% approval rating for Coleman Domingo as Blade. Moving on from Coleman, from one Spirit of Vengeance, or not Spirit of Vengeance, but from one Midnight Sun, rather, to another, the final pick of the 7th round is the Polynesian delegation. And they drafted Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider. He's been portrayed by Nicolas Cage in live action. There are strong rumors that he's going to be coming to the MCU very soon, being portrayed by a different actor. But a lot of people have fan cast Keanu Reeves as Blade. I'm sorry, Ghost Rider. I apologize. A lot of people have fan cast Keanu Reeves as Ghost Rider. I, for one, think he'd be a great Ghost Rider. And, of course, Keanu Reeves is of Polynesian descent. So, I think it works in that respect. I definitely think that, obviously, he's an adoptee. So there's not so much in his story that would change if his family was from a Polynesian background, but he still grew up the same way the comic character grew up. I would imagine, again, if Keanu Reeves was playing him, he would play him in essentially the same way that he's been portrayed in other media. So I have no objection to Polynesian Ghost Rider. I definitely have no objection to Keanu Reeves as Ghost Rider, but let's see what the people think. People agree with me. 100% approval rating for Polynesian Johnny Blaze. 33.3 strongly approve and 66.7 somewhat approve of the draft, with 66.7 strongly approve and 33.3 somewhat approve of Keanu Reeves playing Johnny Blaze. So that's it. Those were the 10 picks. I just kind of ran through it, but those were the 10 picks in the 7th round of the racial draft. You can find us in all the places. You can find us on YouTube, where, if you like my face, I don't know. I mean, like my face. But even if you don't like my face, like, subscribe, share, do all the things. Be a part of the racial draft family. Come on back for more episodes that I guarantee will be longer than this one. But it was all killer, no filler for this round recap. The 7th round, we are trying to rapidly catch up. We're going to get to the 8th round shortly, and the 9th round, because we are getting close to, there's 12 rounds in our season 8 single season draft. So go ahead, go to all the places, racialdraft.com, the social media platform of your choice. Make your voice heard. Email us, racialdraftpodcast.com. racialdraftpodcast@gmail.com. Sorry about that. But until next time, all things are possible.